You're welcome to this course, Information Privacy Engineering and Privacy by Design. So let's take a look at the topic for today, which is Chapter 2. Okay, Chapter 2, it's Information Privacy Concept. We want to look at the concept of what we call the information privacy. Now let's quickly take a look at information privacy. Information privacy has been defined in a text called the Security Architecture for Open System Interconnections. They defined information privacy, or they define privacy as the right of individual to control or to influence what information related to them may be collected or stored by who and to whom that information should be disclosed. So they define privacy as the right of individual to control or to influence what information that concerns them that need to be collected by any organization or by any information system, and by who and to whom. So these are two concepts. You have the right to control and to influence which information of yours that you can disclose to who and by who. By who and to who you disclose this information. Okay, so this is what we call privacy. So privacy is defined in a text that was written by this ITUT recommendation X800. They define the text is Security Architecture for Open System Interconnection. This is how information has been described or defined in this text. So it's your right as an individual. It's your right to control whatever you want to disclose about yourself. Maybe to your banks. When you want to open a bank account, you need to disclose some of your informations, right? Like your name, your address, all of these things. The bank has the right to collect this information. So you know who you are disclosing this information to, and for what reasons are you disclosing this information to them, so that you can open an account, right? And let's say you want to get NIN, National Identification Number. You want to get your National Identification Number. You have to disclose your information, right? Let's say you're writing WAEC, West African Examination Council, or you're writing Cambridge IGCSE exams, or you're writing Cambridge A-level, or you're doing any of the big exams, okay? Canada grade 12, Australia grade 12, Saudi Arabia grade 12, any of these exams, when you're enrolling for the exam, you have to disclose your personal information. We're going to come to personally identifiable information. We're going to come to that. So you got to disclose your personally identifiable informations to this organization. So it's your right to give your information, to have a control and influence on your information that relates to you, and to who is collecting it from you, and for what reason are they collecting and storing your information. For example, if you are applying to Waidsum University now, the admission department has to collect your information, right? You got to fill the admission application form, whether online or physical application form. So you got to fill this application form. From there, you got to put your phone number, your address, your passport number, everything. You got to fill your course, you got to study, your certificate result, everything. You got to put all this information there. So the privacy is your right. The information privacy is your right, and you control who you give and for what reason you give it to anybody. So that's what privacy is all about. But that's not all. According to a U.S. National Research Council, the reports and indicate that in the context of information, the term privacy usually refer to, this is U.S. National Research Council, this is how they refer privacy, how they define privacy. They said that privacy refers to making ostensibly private information about an individual unavailable to parties that should not have the information. So privacy is to keep your information so close, so tight, that people who are not authorized users, people who are not supposed to have access to your information, your personally identifiable informations, those people cannot have access to your personally identifiable informations. So You cannot just bug it to people and want to give or want to take their personal informations. Okay, when people ask you personal questions, two personal questions, it's your right to control or to influence, to give or not to give. So making obsessively private information about an individual unavailable to parties that should not have those information in the first case. That's why you see some organization, they will tell you your informations are safe with them, that they're not going to disclose your information for whatever reason to anyone. And they have to comply with that bargain. They have to comply with that arrangement. They cannot disclose your information to a third party because your informations are private. They are supposed to be at your discretion to release or not to release. Every of your information is at your discretion to release, and the reasons to release them must be solid. Maybe for your IC number or ID number, your national identity card number. When you're registered, you go to get your information, your driving license. When you try to get a driving license, you have to disclose your personally identifiable information to these organizations so that they can issue you a driving license, your photos, your name, your whatever, your details. You have to disclose to this organization. Even social platform like Facebook, like Instagram, when you're opening this social platform, they will ask you for all these informations. So they cannot disclose your information or give out your information for no serious reason, just like that. Okay, your information should be your privacy. So privacy interests attached to the gathering. So private, still on information privacy. Privacy interests attached to what? Gathering, gathering of information, control of information, protection of information, and the use of information about individual. Okay, so you have to like an institution, like for example Waidsum University has to gather your information. They have to control your information, and they have to protect your information, and they have to use your information based on maybe probably before they give you admission. So but they cannot disclose your information to a third party without your authorization. They cannot. Now let's go to the next one, what we call the personally identifiable information. Now personally identifiable information refers to the information that can be used to distinguish or to trace any individual's identity, like your name, your personally identifiable information are those specific, highly specific information that can be used to identify you, that can be used to trace you, that can be used to note you, that can be used to signal you, that can be used to determine you. So these informations are very confidential and they're very vital. Okay, so this information, according to NIST SP 800-120, this is a publication. The title of this publication is Guide to Protecting the Confidentiality of Personally Identifiable Information. Now, according to this publication, they give the following examples of information that might be considered personally identifiable information. Now, one of the informations of yours that will be classified or categorized as personally identifiable information is your name. Your name is uniquely yours. Your name, okay? Your name. Your personal identification, whatever means, like your passport number, okay? Your passport number, your BVN, your NIN, national identity card number, your NIN, all these are your personal identification, your driving license number, all these are your social security number, okay, in case of United States, your social security number. These are your personal identification, right? Your insurance number, these are your personal identification. Then another very vital integral part of personally identifiable information is your address information. Your address is super connected to part of or an integral part of personally identifiable information. your home address, your office address, all your addresses are part of personally identifiable information. Then your asset information, during elections, some people, they declare their asset, right? Your asset information, like your house, the location of your house. Every house has a name, right, of owner. So these are your equipment, your company equipment, your business equipment, the things, the assets you owned, all the assets you own, they are in your names, right? So they are also called the personally identifiable information. With all this, they can trace you. For example, some investigative journalism, they got to find out the names of all those corrupt Africans that have homes in Dubai, houses in Dubai, houses in the United Kingdom, houses in United States, in Singapore, in Malaysia. So you can trace them by what? By their asset information, by the property informations, the names of the owners of the property. So you can trace this. Okay. Okay. Then another thing that is also integral part of personally identifiable information is your telephone number. Your telephone number is uniquely your number, right? It's uniquely your number in your specific country. So a telephone number is an example or an integral part of personally identifiable information. Then another integral part of personally identifiable information is your personal characteristics. Okay, your personal characteristics. There are certain things that are very peculiar to you alone. Okay, these ones I attest to personally identifiable information. Then another one is information identifying personally owned property. I think I kind of explained this when I was explaining asset information. Information identifying personally owned properties, for those who have houses in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Middle East, so to say. A lot of politicians, they go buy homes in United Kingdom. They hide money, they stock money, and all of this, all of this. Okay, they have houses in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, in United Kingdom, in Wales, in England, in United Kingdom. In all of these four countries, in Northern Ireland, in United Kingdom, all of these four countries in United Kingdom, some of your corrupt politicians, especially from the third world nation. I don't want to mention a particular or any particular continent, but mostly from third world nations. So they own property from corrupt proceeds that they make from politics. They go buy properties in all these countries. So we can trace, if you really want to do investigative journalism, you can trace these owners of this asset with all this information identifying their personally owned property using this criteria. Okay, now let's take a look at the next integral part of personally identifiable information. The information is about individuals that is linked or linkable to one of the above. Any information about individual that is linked or linkable to any of the ones we mentioned here. So any of them, anything about you that is linked to any of this is also part of personally identifiable information. Now let's move on. Still on what we call the privacy by design. We have privacy by engineering, we have privacy by design. First of all, before we get to privacy by engineering, we must have privacy by design. Okay, and then after privacy by design, the design of privacy, and then we have privacy by engineering, the maintenance, the checks, the routing, the whatever, the optimization, the maintenance, all of this becomes the privacy by engineering. Now let's quickly take a look at what we mean by privacy by design. Okay, the first step in privacy by design before we talked about privacy by design, is to first of all recognize that anytime we're dealing with privacy of personally identifiable information, we have two concepts. The one we just talked about just now, this one, we say personally identifiable information, right? This personally identifiable information is in two different broad concepts. The first one is called the privacy by design, and the second one is called the privacy by engineering, privacy engineering. Okay, now let's take a look at them. The goal of privacy by design is to take privacy requirement into account through the system development process. So when we're developing the security process, and then we have to take into cognizance the requirements. we have to take into cognizance the requirements of privacy. So when you're designing a security system, you have to take into cognizance the requirements of privacy in the process of the system development process. In the system development process or in the system life cycle, you have to take into cognizance the requirements of. That's what we call privacy by design. Now, if you this same privacy by design is of, according to ISO 29100, Information Technology Security Techniques Privacy Framework. Okay, this is the publication. This is like a book. Okay, a guide for this ISO. Now it says it views privacy by design as the practice of considering privacy. So what do you mean by privacy by design? It's a practice, a concept of considering privacy by safeguarding the measures at the time of the design of the system. So excuse me. According to this ISO, International Standard Organization, is an organization that regulates quality assurance, quality concept, and so on and so forth in IT design. Now, according to this organization, it views privacy by design as the practice, a concept of considering privacy and safeguarding privacy measures at the time of the design of the system. So first of all, you have to consider the privacy, safeguarding privacy, and the measure you take at the time of the design. So when you are designing the whole system, when you're taking to cognizance the privacy concept, that's what we call privacy by design. Like when you're doing something, okay, you remember, okay, there could be this kind of problem in the future. You remember, so that you can create the opportunity to check that problem. Okay, when you build a house, you can think of erosion. You put erosion into concept. You think of so many other factors into concept. The wind, the whatever, the storm, the whatever. You have to put them into concept. So you put them. So in information technology, when you consider privacy in your design process, in your system design process, then we call it privacy by design. Now let's move on quickly. Now let's go to the second phase of personally identifiable information. That phase is called the privacy engineering. Now privacy engineering, let's look at it from different concepts and from different publications or from different view. Now, privacy engineering involves taking account of privacy during the entire life cycle of ICT, during the entire life cycle of information communication technology. So when you take into cognizance or you take into account the privacy itself during the entire life cycle, okay, during the building process, the implementation process, the maintenance process, all of the process, the moment you are taking into account the privacy, then such is called privacy engineering. Then according to NISTIR 80062, and the publication was an introduction to privacy engineering and risk management in federal system. Okay, it's a federal organization in the United States that published this article. Okay, they define privacy engineering as a specialty discipline of system engineering focused on what? Achieving freedom from conditions that can create problems for individuals with unacceptable consequences that arise from the system as it processes personally identifiable information. So the whole process is a specialty in engineering, a new engineering. Okay, it's a new engineering, privacy engineering, a specialty in engineering or engineering system that is focused on what? Achieving freedom from conditions that can create problems for individuals with unacceptable consequences that might arise from the system as it processes the personally identifiable information. Now, in the process of processing your personally identifiable information, then the concept of safeguarding this information and protecting the individuals from against unaccepted consequences because they've released the information to you, protecting them against on any unaccepted consequences that could arise from the you processing this information. You cannot say, oh, during your processing stage of this information you were hacked, so other people had access to the information, and then they went after those individuals, and then they duped them, or they did something to them that shouldn't be. So that means there was no proper privacy engineering in your whole system network. So in order for us to have a specific design or a specialty that harnesses the privacy of individuals when you are processing their personally identifiable information, that concept that maintains and regulates and protects and detects and does all kinds of engineering, risk management, risk assessment to all the informations of individuals that you've collected or of organizations that you've collected. The whole process is called privacy engineering. Now, this same privacy engineering focuses on implementing techniques that decrease privacy risk. Yes. So the whole privacy engineering has something to do with the organization implementing techniques that will reduce privacy risk and enable organizations to make purposeful decisions about resources allocation and effective implementations of control in information system. So it's not only about what we've said, but we also say that privacy engineering is the ability of an organization to focus on implementing techniques that will reduce privacy risk, the privacy of information, personally identifiable information that they've collected, the ability to implement techniques, to implement algorithms, ability of the organizations or of the company to implement algorithm or softwares or apps that will help to decrease the risk of the privacy risk, that will reduce the inadvertent risk of people's privacy, that the data or information that you collected from people, and also ability to enable your organizations to make purposeful decisions, concrete decisions, okay, about resource allocations, and effective implementation of controls in information system is also part of what we call privacy engineering. Now let's go on quickly. Let's take a look at this figure 2.1 in this chapter 2, which is information privacy development life cycle. Now if you take a look at this information privacy development life cycle, you agree with me that here we have what we call the privacy by design, and at the bottom here we have privacy engineering. Now let's take a look at the 4 blocks of privacy by design. First of all, when you are designing or when you are looking at the concept of privacy by design, you have to first of all determine the requirements. You know, when we are talking about design, we are only talking about designing the requirement or formulating the requirement or developing policies that will help to protect private individuals' personally identifiable informations, right? So the first block is to determine requirements or develop policies that will help to protect people's private informations and make them private in your network or in your system. The second phase of privacy by design is assess the risk. You know, when you are designing, you have to assess what risk or how are people vulnerable to risking their informations just by giving you their information, like the banks. Okay, all your information that you give it to the banks must be highly and superficially protected, right? So this information should not get to unauthorized users, right? Okay, so another block of privacy by design during the design process. So they must assess the risk before you design or you do the engineering aspect of it. Okay, so you must assess the risk. And then another block of privacy by design is to select the security, right? Select what type of security you want to use and the privacy control measures that you want to implement, right? You must look at that block when you are designing privacy mechanism. The last phase of privacy by design is to develop the program now or integrate the plan. Integration plan must be adhered to. So these are the 4 blocks or 4 phases of privacy by design. Now let's go to privacy by engineering. The first phase of privacy by engineering is to implement controls. Okay, control system. You must develop if you study engineering, there's a course called control engineering. Okay, you must implement your control system. Okay, so that to ensure that the informations on your networks or your system or your information system are super protected. Then another work that is done by privacy engineering is to perform system integration. They have to integrate the system, okay, with all these vital components that you have. You have to integrate every vital part or integral part of the system and make them work not in isolation but in a holistic design concept. Then another block of engineering that you do is to test. You have to test. We're going to talk about testing. Testing is a very vital as an integral part of engineering, right? So that we see whether what we have developed or designed or developed is working according to our specifics. We talked about when we were studying computer network or network essential. Okay, so testing and evaluating. You have to evaluate. You have to evaluate your concept to see. So when you are doing like masters or PhD, you see when you're formulating your objective in engineering, they usually the beginning of your words that you use to test, to validate, to evaluate, to train, these are words you develop for objectives when you're doing your postgraduate studies, right? When you're formulating your objectives. So in engineering, this is a big holistic concept. You have to test what you have developed, what you have designed, and what you've developed. You have to simulate, you have to test, you have to evaluate, you have to train people, your engineers or your technicians, in order to be able to maintain what has been installed, what your installations. Okay. Now after this phase, we go to monitor. You have to monitor, you have to audit. You have to, both internal and external, you have to audit the system and see if the system is working according to the design parameters. Okay. And then you have to audit, you have to do what we call the incident response. You have to give feedback system. Okay. So all of these 4 blocks, they explain the concept of privacy engineering: implement control, perform system integration, test, evaluate, and train, and then monitor, audit, and do what we call incident control. So this is the first phase of chapter 2, or the first diagram in chapter 2, which shows the information privacy development lifecycle. Now let's move still on the figure 2.2. That's chapter 2, figure 2, the foundational principles of privacy by design. Foundational principles of privacy by design. First of all, every privacy by design concept that you come up with must be proactive. Meaning it must not be a reactive sort of design. It must be proactive. And then at the same time, it must be preventive, not remedial. It must not be a system that we, like they used to say, prevention is better than cure. Okay. It must be a system that should be able to prevent attack. When people are trying to attack into your system, information system, to steal if people's information in your system, then the privacy design must be able to actually prevent attack. Okay, the algorithm must be able to, on its own, by itself, by default, must be able to prevent attack. Okay, prevent attack, not after it has been attacked you're not looking for remedial solutions. Okay, another concept of that privacy by design should have is privacy should be by default. Okay, it shouldn't be manual. It should be manual. The system doesn't have to require an individual check it and update it. It should be by default. Privacy should be by default in your information system or your organization. Another thing is privacy embedded into design. You must embed privacy into the design system. Okay, it should be part and parcel of the entire system network, or of the entire system of your information system in your organization. Then it should be full functionality. Okay, it should be positive sum, not zero sum. Full functionality, and it should be positive sum and not zero sum. Then end to end, it must be like have a security end to end in the entire life cycle of it should give an entire life cycle protection of the entire security architecture. It must not be one part you have privacy and the other part there is no privacy. It must be holistically. Another integral part is visibility and transparency. Privacy should be visible to the information system users, and also should be transparent. Respect for user privacy. The system should be designed in such a way that it has respect. It does not proliferate. Okay, it does not proliferate individuals' information, personally identifiable information. Now let's move on to the next one. Requirements and policy development. Requirements that you need during your design. We say design has something to do with the requirements. Okay, privacy requirements and the policies. This is about design. So this is for the design. Privacy by design. This one is privacy by design. Requirements and policy is privacy by design. So when you are developing some requirements, you are developing some policies for privacy in an information system or in an organization, that holistic concept is what we call privacy by design. Now let's quickly take a look at the blocks step by step that describe these requirements. The foremost is to recognize an essential element of planning. Planning is super important as a part of the requirements and policies when you are developing or you are designing privacy. First is the planning of the information privacy. You have to plan it. Okay, you have to plan it very holistically, and you have to give a key definition of what privacy requirements is all about that you're looking at. So that's number one, planning, super planning. Number two is the key sources of requirements. Now, what are your key sources of your requirement for your privacy? One, you must look at the regulations. You must formulate regulations for regulations as to how people's information will be kept private. Okay, and then you must create standards. Okay, or upon which only on this can be used, this can be used. Okay, or the framework. You must create those frameworks and standards for regulating the information privacy. And then another thing regarding the requirement is the organization's conceptual commitment. So all of this you have to factor them in when you are looking at requirements for people's privacy. The next block is to look at a key actor at the stage is the system's owner. So the system owner, like the owner of the organization. Now, what is their responsibility? Which is the person or organization having the responsibility for the development, for the procurement, for the integration, the organization. So you must, when you're designing or developing policies and requirements, at this third stage, now you look at the organization or the owner of the organization or the owner of the information system. Okay, you look at his responsibility for developing, for procurement, for integration, for modifications of information, because they might modify some of this information. For operation, you look at their responsibility of operation of people's information. You look at their responsibility of the maintenance and the final disposition of an information system. So you must look at this third stage, critical stage. Remember, the first stage is planning. The second stage is to look at the requirement, and this requirement has to include regulation, standards, and organizational conceptual commitment. Then the third stage to look at the owner, the system owner, who owns the system that we're talking about. It could be a single owner or an organization. So we look at the owner's responsibility. What responsibility do the owner have to embark? What are the tasks ahead that they have to do? They have to do the system development, the procurement, and they must ensure that these do not violate people's integrity and privacy. The integration, modification, operation, maintenance, and final disposition of information system. Okay. The fourth stage is the system owner needs to identify the standard and regulations that applies and then develop an overall plan for privacy milestone during the system development. Okay, so the owner has to now looking at the standard and regulations, and they apply and develop an overall plan for the privacy milestone of the entire system information system. Okay, then after that, the system owner has now looked at the regulations that he has set in block 2. he has married these regulations with the privacy milestone, where he sees the privacy of his information system together with the regulations and standard. Then after that, the next one is that is also important, is to ensure that all the stakeholders, could be the investors, could be the government, could be the organization itself, all the stakeholders, okay, could be the customers, the clients, now have a common understanding, including privacy implications, consideration, and requirement. Let's say if you are joining anything, they will give you a very long thing we don't read. Privacy requirements, the rules and regulations. Sometimes we don't read. When you are signing up for Facebook, you don't read. You just you sign, like as if you read it. Every organization, they have this. They have privacy policies. You have to read, and then you sign. You agree. You click I agree and I accept, and then so this at this stage, the organization has made available. They've made available this privacy that they've developed. They've made them available to stakeholders, and which include their understanding, the privacy implications, the consideration. So when you try to, like, if you violate a community rule on Facebook, they might just kick you out. They might kick you out if you violate community rules, because you have violated the privacy rules. When you invade people on Instagram and you insult people, you bully people, they might close your account, right? Because you are violating the rules, okay, the privacy rules, okay? So you cannot violate, because at this point they make it available for their clients, their users, their stakeholders. So at this block, then the organization has to make it available for the users, the stakeholders. Because you as a user or a customer, you are still a stakeholder. Without you, the business will not flourish, okay? You're a stakeholder. It's just that you are a stakeholder that do not probably benefit directly from the whole system, okay? So you have to find a way to benefit from the system stakeholdership, okay? Now, and the last block for privacy requirements and policies development by privacy by design in personally identifiable information is an unexpected output of this activity is a set of supporting documents that provides records of the agreed planning decision, including how these decisions conform to overall corporate privacy policies. So this one is just an output of what has been agreed on, a set of supporting documents that provides the records of the agreed planning decisions, including how these decisions conform to overall. So the things you signed, you agreed on, is this last phase. Now let's move on quickly. Now what we call privacy risk assessment. We have what we call the privacy risk assessment. The privacy risk, let's first of all explain what you mean by privacy risk assessment before we talked about the 4 elements of privacy risk assessment. Now the privacy risk assessment is the ultimate objective of privacy risk assessment is to enable, the big objective. Here we are talking about the big objective. The big objective of a privacy risk assessment is to enable organizational executives to determine an appropriate budget for privacy, and within that budget implement the privacy controls that optimize the level of protection for the personally identifiable information for all the users in that particular information systems. Okay, so it's about risk assessment is about budget. The organizational executive has to determine a very suitable budget for privacy, and that budget must implement the privacy control to optimize a very high level of protection for users in that network. Now there are 4 elements for privacy risk assessment. Now let's take a look at these 4 elements. The first one is called privacy related assets. The first element of privacy risk assessment is called the privacy related asset. Now what does that mean? Privacy related asset is anything that has value to the organization and that therefore requires protection. So every organization has what is super important to them that needs to be protected. So anything that has value to an organization and the organization needs to protect it is categorized under the element of what we call privacy related asset, meaning that is an asset and it needs to be protected. It needs to be private. It needs to be kept private. Okay, it needs to be protected. Then the second element of privacy risk assessment is called privacy threat. Privacy threat. Now, we already explained threat in chapter 1, right? So privacy threat is a potential for violation, potential ability, potential individual, potential whatever, potential for violation of privacy. Anything that is capable or that looks as violating, that looks as a thing that can violate the privacy of the information system or of the organization, which exists when there is a circumstance or a capability, an action that is taken either to violate the privacy of an individual or of the entire organization system, or an event that could violate privacy, or any event that can violate privacy and cause harm to an individual in an information system, is called privacy threat. It's called privacy threat. So the third element of privacy risk assessment is called the privacy vulnerability. Privacy vulnerability. Now, if privacy vulnerability is a flaw or a weakness in the system's design, you know, some attacker can see your flaw. Sometimes we have flaws in what we do, right? So those idiots out there that are looking for your downfall, they will be looking for your flaws wherever you make mistake, so, or wherever there is a weakness in your system. So privacy vulnerability is where you are vulnerable, where people can attack you easily. So it's a flaw or a weakness in the system's design. In the system's design, not only in the design, if they don't find anything in the design, they look at the system's implementation. Maybe in the implementation there were cracks here and there were bricks here and there are some loopholes here and there in the implementation process or in the operation. If they don't find it in the implementation, they look at the operations, the way it's being used. They study the operations of the system. So if they can find a flaw or a weakness in the operation of the system, then they will therefore see the vulnerability of that privacy. Oh, this system is vulnerable here, we can attack from here. If they cannot find from there, they look at the management that could be exploited. They could see, they look at the management. If they manage from the management aspect of the system, whether it is vulnerable to attack. Okay, that could be exploited by attack action to violate the system's privacy policy or to compromise the personally identifiable information. So this is vulnerability. The fourth element of privacy risk assessment is the privacy control. Okay, the privacy control involves the management, the operational, the technical control that is prescribed for an information system to protect the personally identifiable information and ensure that the organization's privacy policy is enforced. So privacy control, entity control is to ensure that your privacy is enforced, is totally put into check. Okay, so these are the four elements of privacy risk assessment. Okay, and we said the whole objective of privacy risk assessment is the organization's executive to come up with a budget to plan and implement privacy, okay, for that organization, so as to protect the organization and protect every user in that organization. Okay, now let's move on quickly. Now let's take a look at privacy risk assessment. It's still on privacy risk assessment. Now let's look at privacy risk assessment. Consists of 3 steps. There are 3 steps to this whole privacy risk assessment. The first one is determine the harm. Okay, when we are assessing how much risk is in a privacy design, the first one is to determine the harm and the impact also to individual and the organization of a privacy violation. So when we are assessing the risk, we look at if there is a harm, at what level or how will it impact the individuals in that information system or the organization when there is any privacy violation. So this is the first step. How much harm, how much impact, how much negative impact can come from a violation of privacy. So that's the first assessment we carry out. The second one is called determine the likelihood of privacy incident. This is a probability of event. Okay, how much how much easily can this thing be vulnerable to attack or to a threat? Okay, the probability of event, the likelihood, the chance of how much percentage of it do you have, how much chance is there for you to be attacked? Okay, how much chance is there for an attack to happen in your privacy system, for people to be bullied in this in your system? So the likelihood, the probability of occurrence, the probability of events is what we call the second step of risk assessment. Okay, this is in detailed explanation. This is a privacy incident, and we say the privacy incident is defined as an occurrence that actually or potentially violate the privacy of personally identifiable information, or that constitute a violation or an imminent threat of violations of privacy policy, privacy procedure, and acceptable use of policies. Now let's go to the third step. The third step is for risk assessment, privacy risk assessment, is to determine the level of risk. Okay, to determine the level of risk as the combination of the cost of the privacy incident occur and the likelihood. So when you combine these two, both the harm or the impact, the negative impact when violations to privacy happen, and you combine the probability or the likelihood of this harm happening, when you combine them, then you'll be able to determine the level of risk that is present in this thing. So these are the three steps for privacy risk assessment when we are assessing privacy. Now let's move on to the next one. Privacy controls. Now let's take a look at privacy control. Privacy controls involves or are the technical engagement that you develop, like could be your algorithms, could be your mechanisms, could be your apps, your software that you develop in order to check or regulate to ensure that users in your platforms, they are protected, super protected. Okay, it could be the physical layer system, like when you are doing your wiring, your cabling, the one from network system. Okay, it could be from the physical, how much of privacy this can provide. It could be on the administrative side, the interface, the algorithm that has to do with the user, the administrative measures that are taken, employed or taken by an organization to satisfy privacy requirements. So your technical, your algorithm that you've put in place, your physical nomenclature, architectures that you've put in place, and your administrative measures and policies that you put in place to create or satisfy privacy requirements is what we call the privacy control. So your control involves your technical, your physical, your administrative measure that you put in place to satisfy your requirements. Now, also privacy controls includes or results in one, removing the threat source. Wherever there's a threat on your system, information system, then the control should be able by default to remove the threat. Okay, where there's any threat, like I said, on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any of these social networks, when there is a threat, they will remove the person entirely. So the privacy control results in ability to remove any threat. So if your system cannot remove a threat, then there is no strong control. There's no privacy control in that system or information system. Now, another thing that could result from privacy control is changing the likelihood that the threat can exploit a vulnerability by reducing or eliminating the vulnerability. So the control should be able by default to reduce the vulnerability and or the probability of people having access to attack or bully or create threats on this system or your information system by changing the amount of the personally identifiable information that you've collected or the way that is being processed. Excuse me. So you could change the way that you'll be processing this information. Maybe the way you'll be processing it is what has been creating this likelihood, probability of threat being created, okay, to users on your platform. So a good privacy control should be able to eliminate the threat, right? Remove the threat, and should be able to change the likelihood of the threat happening. The probability of the threat happening must be reduced, okay, or the chance of the attacker exploiting your weakness must be checked or reduced or eliminated completely. The third phase of privacy control, or what might result to when there is a strong privacy control, is that when there is a strong privacy control, then you should be able to change the consequences of privacy events. You should be able to change the consequences of privacy event. Now let's take a look at the security controls. We've talked about privacy controls. Let's take a look at security controls in five different blocks. In security control, there are safeguards or the countermeasures prescribed for an information system for an organization that is designed to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of its information, and to meet a set of defined information requirements. So it is the safeguard or the countermeasures that you prescribe or that you use for an information system or any organizations that are designed to protect confidentiality. So your countermeasure or your safeguards is one of your security controls. All right. Then another aspect of the security control is there is an overlap in the areas of concerns of information security and information privacy. In a good security control, there must be an overlap between the information security and information privacy. Then another aspect of security control is security controls when you select security control and you implement them for information system, either for an individual or for an organization, then must be able to create and collect and use the process, store and maintain and disseminate and disclose and dispose of all personally identifiable information, address both the security and privacy concern. So security control must be able to do all of this. When you select a good security control and implement it for your system, then it must be able to create. Okay, it must be able to create informations, collect informations, use information, process information, store information, maintain information, disseminate information, disclose information, and dispose information of personally identifiable information that you have on your system, and address both the security and the privacy concern. So if you don't have all of this, then there's no good security control. Then the next one is a phase of security control is that the individual privacy cannot be achieved solely through securing personally identifiable information. Okay, the individual privacy cannot be achieved only by securing personally identifiable information. So meaning you have to do more. What more are you going to add? You have to safeguard both the security and the privacy control. You must make sure your privacy controls are put in place and your security controls are put in place. Then you have a good security control. Now let's go to the next one, which is the selection process. Now in the selection process, we're going to be selection process for security control, where you're going to be selecting and documenting security and privacy controls. Okay, you should be able to select them, and then you should be able to synchronize them with the risk assessment activities that you have carried out. You select your security control, you have to select your privacy controls, select and document them, and then synchronize them with the risk assessment that you've carried out. Then you're moving forward in designing a proper privacy and proper security control mechanism. Now the next phase that you have to look at, the next thing you have to look at is you have to look at a baseline set of controls. You must select a baseline set of control, and then and they should be adjusted with additional control based on refinement of the risk assessment. So whatever control you selected, either for security control or privacy control, they must be refined with risk assessment process that you've also carried out. Then the last but not the least for this is the refinement. The selection process has to look at the refinement and considers any possible secondary risks that result from the baseline controls and how they affect the security assessment or how they affect the risk assessment that should be carried out in the entire system. Now let's go to what we call privacy program and integration plan. Now briefly, privacy program is the principal objective of the privacy by design is to ensure that information privacy considerations are considered at every stage of the design, the system development. So when you are developing the system, every stage of it, you must ensure that the privacy by design, that's which means the requirement for privacy, and the requirement includes the standards, okay, the considerations and all of these things, and the policies, the formulations, the development of these policies. All of these are at a very serious protection, and you have to give adequate measures are designed into the system during the system design and development process, rather than going back and forth. Then another privacy program and integration plan is an essential element in achieving this objective is documented and approved privacy program. Now, what are these elements? Let's take a look at the essential element that should be looked into when you are achieving the objectives and of a privacy program and integration plan, all in totality. Elements of such plan should include one of it is you must identify key privacy rules that will be active throughout the system design and implementation. Key privacy rules, okay, that will be active throughout the system design process and in the implementation process. Another element that should be taken into cognizance during the objective and design and documentations of the privacy program is identify standards and regulations that apply. You must know which standards you're going to use, which regulation you're going to use. Remember, this forms the requirement, and the requirement forms the design, privacy by design. Then another essential element is developing an overall plan for privacy milestone during the system development. You must be able to actuate and develop an entire plan for the whole milestone, the whole entire journey during the system development. Therefore, another one element of this privacy is to ensure that all key stakeholders have a common understanding, including the privacy implication, consideration, and requirement. All stakeholders have common understanding, not like the management understand this, the users understand this government understand this. There must be a synchronism between the understanding that has to do with all stakeholders when it comes to this information system and information organization. Okay, another key element for privacy is that when you're designing the objective of privacy is describing the requirement for integrated privacy control. You must design which requirements are needed for integrating the privacy control within the system, okay, and also the process of coordinating the privacy engineering activities in your entire system. Okay, now let's take a look at what we call figure 2.3, chapter 2, figure 3, the components of privacy engineering. What are the major components of privacy engineering? One, let's take a look at privacy impact assessment. Or let's start from privacy requirement. In privacy requirement, we have what we call, when you are formulating your requirements and policies, privacy policies and privacy requirement, you must be able to come up with some laws, okay, that regulates the privacy of individual informations in your system. You must be able to come with regulations. You must design laws, design policies, design regulations, okay, and you must be able to design standards and best practices. You must create your best practices outlook that ensures that there will be a complete privacy by design process. Okay, then after that we look at your risk assessment. The risk assessment has something to do with your security risk model. You must develop security risk model. Okay, then after that we have to look at privacy engineering and security objectives. In your privacy engineering, because after you design, you carry out risk assessment, then we now implement what we call the privacy engineering and security objectives. That this one has something to do with your map system. Your privacy engineering has something to do with your map system or your map system capabilities, okay, or your requirements, and also it has something to do with your assurance that system meets requirements and address risk. So your privacy engineering should ensure that your system meets the necessary risk requirement or the necessary threat requirement, assuring the users that your system meets the requirements and they address any kind of risk that that may come their way. Okay, then we have risk management. The risk management is the select security controls and technologies. What kind of security controls you go to use? The management, risk management has to determine this, and what kind of technology they go to implement. Okay, this one will create way for components used in information security. Okay, this one will pave way for the kind of component that you can use for your information security. Then the next one is privacy impact assessment. So this one is now looking at the impact assessment. That's after you've implemented your privacy engineering, then you now look at it holistically. What over the years or over the you review your impact, your privacy, and see whether it's happy or it's not. So you look at you assess the risk, you select control, you document how the system meets the requirement. So all of this describe what we call the components of privacy engineering. So in privacy engineering, we must carry out privacy requirement, risk assessment, we must carry out privacy engineering and security objective, we must carry out risk management, we must carry out privacy impact assessment. So these 5 are the components of privacy engineering. These 5 concepts are the components of privacy engineering. Now let's move on quickly. Now let's look at figure 2.4, which is risk management life cycle. The risk management life cycle. Now in the risk management life cycle, first of all, we have to identify the user, identify the issues, the problems, and assess the risk. We have to identify the issues, the problems, and then we assess what kind of risk this can pose to the user or to the system. Then 2, we prioritize and then select the control mechanism that we're going to use in order to enumerate or enumerate the potential threat that are on the system or that may come to the system. Then the next is to implement control. Okay, you first of all select what control you're going to use, then the next thing you implement the control, because you know it is after you've implemented the control that the control will be able to prevent vulnerability and every other nomenclature that comes with securing the system. Okay, then after that you monitor and evaluate. Okay, so this is what the risk management cycle does. Remember, we measure the risk management here. So here we talked about the risk management as an integral part of components of privacy engineering. So this risk management, what they do is this: they identify issues, assess the risk involved, prioritize and select what kind of control they want to use. They implement the control, and they monitor and they evaluate. Now let's move on to the next one. The next one is what we call figure 2.5, which is called privacy engineering objective. The privacy engineering objectives are 3. So meaning we are coming here, we are now dealing with, we are coming to this one, and privacy engineering, this place. Okay, we are solving this one, privacy engineering objectives. Okay, they are of 3 phases. What do they do, or what is being done under the concept of privacy engineering objective? First of all, we do what we call manageability. Now in manageability, we provide the capability for the granular administration of personally identifiable information, including the alternations, the deletion. Like we want to delete, we should be able to, anyone who is a posed threat, we should be able to delete his account from our system, and so on and so forth. And then the selective disclosure. So all of these are functions of manageability. Then another function of privacy engineering objective is dissociability. Okay, disassociability. Disassociability is to ensure, as a function of privacy engineering objective, is ensure or to enable the processing of personally identifiable information or the event without association to individual or devices beyond the operational requirements of the system. So your ability to process all the PII, personally identifiable information, without going out of the system requirement. Then the third one, the last but not the least, is the predictability. Predictability is also a function of the privacy engineering objective. What do we mean by this predictability? Is the ability or the process of enabling reliable assumption of individual or by individual, by owners, and by the operators about the personally identifiable information and its processing by an information system. So the reliable assumptions that can be made, this is like probability of concept, reliable assumptions that can be made by the individual, by the owners of the system, and by the operators of the system that brings about the personally identifiable information and process them in the information system. So ability to predict reliable assumptions that can help in processing and personally identifiable information in information system. So these are the objectives of privacy engineering. Now let's move on to the next one, privacy implementation. The next one is privacy implementation. Now, during the privacy implementation, we have three stages. We have three stages by which we can implement privacy. The first one is the implementation stage. Developers configure and enable system privacy features. So this is the first thing that has been done during the privacy when you are implementing privacy. The developers this is the developers atmosphere. Okay, this is the developers atmosphere. This is where the developers they configure and enable system privacy features. They configure the kind of privacy features that they want to put in and they enable them, these features. Okay, if you disable the features, then there will be no privacy. But they configure and they enable the features. Then another aspect of it, privacy implementation, is excuse me. Another aspect of privacy implementation includes alignment and integration of privacy control with system functional features. The system already has functional features. You have to align these features of your privacy your privacy features must be aligned with the system features, and also your privacy controls must be aligned with the system features, or the integrating the features of the system with the systems of the privacy control. So the second stage implementation process is integration of your privacy control and your system functional control. Okay, then the third stage of privacy implementation is that an organization should perform developmental testing of the technical. So you have to do what we call developmental testing of the technical and privacy features and functions to ensure that they perform as intended prior to launching the integration phase. So you have to carry out a test to implement and see if what there has been done is performing according to their objective. Now let's go to system integration. Okay, system integration is the activity. System integration activity occur at the point of development of the system for operation. System integrations activity they occur at the point of development of the system for operation. It also part of the privacy control settings that you enable. So when you enable all your privacy control settings, then you are actually also integrating the system, because the privacy control, the security controls, and then the system itself, all of them has to be integrated, and other privacy features needs to be integrated at this point. Then the third aspect is the output of this activity is verified list of operational privacy control integrated into the completed system documentation. So the completed system documentation that you already have, like your website for example, then you have to verify the list of operational privacy controls, and you must integrate them to your completed system documentation. So these are what we call the aspect of system integration. And let's take a look at what we call privacy implementation and evaluation. Let's take a look at what we refer to as privacy implementation and evaluation. Now, in this, privacy testing include the following types of testing. We have three basic type of testing, and this testing, they all account for privacy testing. The first one is called functional testing. The second one is called penetration testing. The third one is called user testing. Now let's take a look at the first test, which is called the functional test, because these are privacy implementation. This is how you evaluate. Evaluation is about testing something to see whether it's working according to the design specific. Okay, so the first one is the functional testing is about advertised privacy mechanism of an information system are tested, other operational conditions to determine whether a given function works according to its requirements. So the privacy mechanism here of an information system, you test the mechanism to see whether it's working according to the requirement. That's the first test, and that test is called functional testing. The second test is called the penetration testing. The penetration testing has something to do with mimicking the real world. Okay, the evaluator has to mimic the real world, like simulation process. The penetration test is like you simulate. Okay, if you want to be a pilot now, you have to learn flight by simulators, right? You don't have, nobody will just give you plane to fly. You have to use simulators to fly plane first. Okay, this is similar to what we call the penetration testing. So the evaluator, he has to mimic the real world attack, has to mimic how people can attack you in your simulation process in an attempt to identify ways to circumvent the privacy features of the application, a system, or of a network. So you have to mimic how people can attack. You have to try to attack yourself first and find your loopholes, your weakness, your vulnerability stages, and see how these people, others can attack you, and then see if you cannot find any loophole, then it means you passed the penetration test. Then the last test is called user test. The user test, the software or the system is tested in the real world by the intended audience, or also called the end user testing. So the user test is also called end user testing. So this one has something to do with your product being out there, being used by your intended audience, maybe for the first 1 week first, before you eventually launch it to the rest of the world. Okay, so these are the three testing that has to do with implementation and evaluation of a design process or privacy engineering. Now let's move on to privacy implementation and evaluation, and let's look at how do we now know that okay, this system is super private and is good to go. So once all of this is completed, then the organization must get certification and accreditation. So your certification involves the comprehensive assessment of the management. Okay, you get the certification. It's a comprehensive assessment of your management system, your operational system, your technical privacy controls in all your information system, to determine to which extent your controls that you've implemented are able to implement or are implemented correctly, operating as intended as you have profound them. They are operating and working very profusely as you have developed them, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements of your entire system. So when this is done, then you means the system is super certified. And there are organizations that will check whether your security network has met this requirement, and once that is done, you'll be certified. You have a certification. Then the next one is called accreditation. Accreditation is the official management decision given by a senior agency, another agency, maybe government agency, okay, or agency official, to authorize operations of the information system, and to explicitly accept the risk to agency operations, agency assets, and individual based on the implementations of the agreed upon set of privacy control. So if you've met the rules and regulations and standards, privacy requirements set up by the official agency, then they will accredit your system and certify your system that it meets both the certification and accreditation process. Now let's go to privacy auditing and incident response. We have to audit the system from time to time to see whether it's able to withstand potential attack in the entire information system. Okay, systems and products are in place of operations, enhancement, and modification to the systems are developed and tested. We have to continuously test, and the hardwares and all the softwares are added and replaced. It has to be tested. Sometimes as the system is working, we have to add new software, new hardware. So we have to constantly and continuously test them. Now, also, this has something to do with the organization should continuously monitor the performance of the system to ensure that it is consistent with the pre-established privacy requirements, and that has to do with the privacy standard, privacy policies, and so on and so forth. And when there is a modification, the system must incorporate and notify that modification has taken place. Now, the two key activities during this stage are auditing and incident response. Auditing is like just involve independent examination of records of activity to ensure compliance with the established controls, policies, and operational procedure that has been set by the officials, and to recommend any indicated changes. So auditing is like maybe the ISO officials come to check if your privacy is working to standard, you are conforming to the requirements, and you are complying to the established control and the policies and the operational procedures that have been set for privacy. Then the incident response is like when an IT security, or first of all, let's say it means a process whereby an incident response involves the mitigation of violations of security policies and recommended practice. For example, when an IT guy is able to mitigate against any violation, let's say attackers are attacking your system, your IT specialist or your network administrator are able to respond to the violations or potential threat that is being posed to your network or to your information system. So that's what we call incident response. Now let's move on quickly. Now, figure 2.6 shows an overlap between information security and privacy. Information security and privacy. Remember, we've described both of them individually. Now let's take a look at them. You see there is an overlap between the two. This overlap is intercept. It's an intercept between, and that intercept is what we call security of personally identifiable information. Now, in security concerns, security concerns arise or comes from unauthorized system behavior, like people who do not have authority to access your system are trying to have access to your system. The privacy concerns comes from byproduct of authorized PII processing, authorized personally identifiable information processing the data or the information. So there's an overlap between these two, and this overlap is what we call the security of personally identifiable information. Now let's go to the next stage. Now this shows figure 2.7, and figure 2.7 is privacy and security objective. Privacy and security objectives. Now in privacy, if you take a look at this way, we have security. If you take a look at this, we have privacy. So what privacy focuses on and what security focuses on. And then in between here is what is common to both of them. What is common to both security policies or privacy policies and security policies. Here is what is common to both of them. Meaning whatever is here, security has something to do with it and privacy has something to do with it. Now in terms of privacy, they focus on individuals' ability to control personally identifiable information, and this includes identifying the uses and users of personally identifiable information, seeking agreement to use PII, limiting PII collections, limiting the use of PII to identify purposes, and all of this. These are the privacy concern And then these are security concerns. Security is to ensure availability of system and protect both the systems and the data from any threat. This is security concern. Now this could include the malicious code detections and prevention mechanisms that is set into your system, configurations of patch management, intrusion detection and mitigation. So if there's any intruder, the system is able to detect and quickly auto detect and solve the problem. Then another aspect of security architecture is the physical protection. The physical protections of information in your system. Okay. Then what is of concern to both security aspect of information system and also the privacy in your information system. What is of concern to both is the accountability, the integrity, the aggregation, the confidentiality, and the destruction. Now let's take a look at one after the other. Okay, here we're not going to go in depth. I think you are at liberty to look at this table. Here we've itemized these ones that we've just mentioned. This what you call the intercept. This intercept between privacy and security, we have itemized them in a table. We've put them in a tabular form. Now, first we look at accountability in terms of security and in terms of privacy. Accountability in terms of security focuses on tracking an individual's action and manipulation of information. So accountability is, in terms of security is to track individuals' action and manipulation of any information in your system. However, or on the other hand, accountability in terms of privacy focuses on tracking the trail of personally identifiable disclosure. The tracking if anyone is trying to have access to personally identifiable disclosure or to personally identifiable information in disclosure in your system. So that's in terms of privacy. In terms of security, it's just to focus on manipulations and any attack on your system. Then in integrity, in terms of security, integrity has something to do with protect against corruption of data by authorized and unauthorized individual. So integrity is to protect the data, protect the corruption of data, corruption happening to data by either authorized people corrupting the data or unauthorized people corrupting the data. That's in terms of security. But integrity in terms of privacy is to seek to ensure that inaccurate PII, that's personally identifiable information, is not used to make an inappropriate decision about a person. Okay, that's integrity in terms of privacy. So aggregation and the likes of you can see aggregation focuses on determining the sensitivity of derived and aggregated data so that appropriate access guidelines can be defined in terms of security. Whereas in terms of aggregation, in terms of privacy, dictates that aggregation or derivations of PII should not be allowed for if the new information is neither authorized by the law or necessary to fulfill a stage purpose. So aggregation in terms of privacy is actually looking at the derivation of new PII. Okay, not to be allowed if the new information is neither authorized by the law, okay, nor is necessary to fulfill any stated purpose. Okay. Now, confidentiality in terms of security it only focuses on process and mechanism. Process and mechanisms, that's to authenticate that that authenticates the system and prevent the system from any authorized access. That's confidentiality in terms of security. But confidentiality in terms of privacy has something to do with focusing on focusing and ensuring that the personally identifiable information is only disclosed for a purpose consistent with the reason for which it was collected in the first place. If not, it will not be disclosed. So that's confidentiality in terms of privacy. Now, destruction in terms of security focus on ensuring that information cannot be recovered once deleted. In terms of security, destruction is to ensure that the information cannot be recovered once it is deleted. But destruction in terms of privacy addresses the need for the complete elimination of collected information once it has served its purpose. Once the information has served its purpose, complete elimination of such information. Now here we have privacy versus utility. Let's take a brief look at privacy and utility, because we say information should be private on the user information system or in an organization. What about the utility, the availability or the quantifiable benefit to multiple legitimate information consumers? Utility is how available something is and how people can have access to it and use it. So if something should be private and something should have a utility, they kind of contradict somehow. So let's take a look at them. First of all, we say an important consideration in the provision of privacy feature in an information system or database is the potential conflict between privacy of personally identifiable information and the potential utilities of collections of personally identifiable information to third parties. You can see there's a conflict of interest, because utility is making something available for use, while privacy is keeping something only for authorized people to have access to. Okay, so utility can be defined as a quantifiable benefit to multiple legitimate information consumers. See, a quantifiable benefit to multiple legitimate information consumers, right? So it's kind of conflict, right? Utility and privacy are often competing requirements. Now let's take a look at the graph in figure 2.8 that is showing utility privacy trade-off. There must be a trade-off between the two, since they contradict each other somehow, because if you want something to be super private, then you have very less utility. If you want something to have utmost utility, maximum utility, then there is less privacy on that thing. So there must be a trade-off, meaning we must be like kind of be at the middle for both of them. Okay, so you can see there is a utility up here and there is privacy here. If utility increases, if this one is coming down, okay, if this one is coming down, up, down, utility is decreasing, while privacy will gradually start increasing. When privacy is decreasing, utility will be increasing. So there must be a trade-off. Okay, there must be a trade-off here inside this place between privacy and utility. And let's move on quickly. Now, usable privacy. Usable privacy. Other usable privacy, we look at what we call usability. We define usability. When you're talking about usable privacy, first of all, you have to define usability. Usability is defined as the extent to which product can be used by specified users to achieve specific goals within effectiveness, within serious effectiveness, within maximum efficiency, within and at the same time give a maximum satisfaction in a specified context of use or in a specified context of usage. So the extent to which product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with maximum effective ability and maximum efficiency, and in that context satisfying the context of use, then is called usability. Now let's take a look at the key terms in these definitions that we've just looked at. The key terms are effectiveness. There must usability, and is something is to be very usable, have high level of usable or usability. That thing must be very effective. Two, it must be very efficient. Three, it must have high satisfaction. Must have a context of use. We must have a user. Must have a goal. Must have a task and product. Okay. Now let's begin to look at each of them. The usable privacy. Each of them that we've mentioned. Remember, we mentioned effectiveness, efficiency, satisfaction. These are all blocks or parts of usability. Now let's describe each of them. Okay, the first block is effectiveness. For anything to have usable privacy, it must be effective. It must be very effective, and effectiveness is has something to do with accuracy and completeness. If something is effective, meaning it's very accurate, meaning it's very like it does things very well. That thing does work very well. completeness, and with high user achieve specific goal. It's able to achieve the goal of for which it was designed or developed. Okay, when something is able to achieve the goal upon which it was designed or developed, then we can say it has high effect. It's very effective. If something works well and meets its design characterization, then we say that thing is very effective. And also have minimum error rate, then we say it's so super effective. Then what if efficiency? If you say something is very efficient, means you look at the input outputs. Okay, you look at the ratio and of input, the output and the input, and see if it's satisfying enough. Okay, it means when you talk about efficiency, it means resources expended in the relation to the accuracy and the completeness with which the user achieve goals. This is typically based on the time required to complete a task or subtask, taking into account accuracy goals. Okay, for example, how fast you're able to accomplish the task and reaching the meeting the goals that was set as standard for, and how well you're able to use the resources that we're supposed to use within that framework. So we can say is efficient. That system is efficient. The disability is efficient. Now let's take a look at satisfaction. Satisfaction is freedom from discomfort. Something can only be satisfying if it doesn't create discomfort. If something is creating discomfort, then it's not satisfied. It's not meeting its design objectives. And then when something also have positive attitude, the use of the product has a positive attitude, and then this is also subjective. Actually, it's a subjective parameter that can be judged using questionnaire, because what may be satisfied to A may not be satisfied to B. So you can use a questionnaire to collect data to find out the satisfiability of a concept in information system. Now let's take a look at the context of use. The context of use has something to do with the user, the task, the equipment that you use, the physical and the social environment in which the product is being used. So these are the context of use. Now let's go to the product. Let's go to the user. The user is the person who interacts with the product, right? Who interacts with the information system. And then let's go to the goal. The goal is the intended outcome. What we want to achieve is the goal. Then let's go to the task. The task, an activity, right, or physical or cognitive required to achieve a goal. Okay, that activity that you do in order to achieve your set goal is called the task. Now the last one is the product. The product, part of the equipment or hardware or software or materials for which usability is to be specified or evaluated is the product. Okay, so these are the 5 elements of usability. These are 5 elements of usability of privacy. Now let's move on to users of privacy services and foundation. Okay, these are just National Research Council. These are just organization, what they said about what this aspect, this topic that we're talking about usability. And there's a publication on usability. The publication is towards better usability, security and privacy information technology. They point out that usability in the context of privacy can refer to 3 different classes of users. The end users of the IT system. There are 3 different users in information system. We have the end users of the IT systems. These end users of IT system, they are the individuals who wish to have as much control as possible over the privacy of personally identifiable information. Then we have the second type of users are the administrators of IT system. We have the end user of IT system, we have the administrators of IT system. The administrators are needed to configure the IT system to ensure or to disable specific privacy feature for individuals or group of individuals whose personally identifiable information is stored in the system, right? So the IT guys that are happy to maintain and administer the network or the system are these type of users. Then the third users are system developers. So we have three users: the end users, of IT system. Okay, we have the end users of IT system, and then we have the administrators of IT system. We have the developers. Developers are those who configure the software and develop the software. Okay, now let's go to the another aspect: disability and utility, usability and utility. Now let's look at usability and utility. Usability refers to the ease of use of privacy feature. The ease of use of privacy features. The ease of use of privacy features. And then utility refers to functionality available for databases containing personally identifiable information with privacy protection in place. So utility has something to do with the functionality of or ability to have all the database containing the personally identifiable information with the privacy protection kept in place in order to create this system. Then the last one is both the concept needs to be considered through the design, implementation, operation of IT system containing personally identifiable information. So both the usability and utility needs to be considered when you're developing a high information system or privacy system. Okay, now let's go to the next one, which is the summary of what we have for this class. Okay, this is the last phase of what we have for this class. It has been a long one. So in the summary, we are saying that we have explained the difference between privacy by design and privacy engineering. We've also stretched on the understanding on the privacy related activity that fits into the system development lifecycle. We talked about, we've also defined the privacy control. We discussed the areas of overlap between security and privacy, and the areas that are distinct to either security and privacy. We also talked and explained the trade-off between privacy and utility. Okay, the trade-off, because one is increasing, the other is decreasing. So one is increasing, the other one is decreasing. So we talked about the trade-off between both of them. Then, in the last but not least, we explained the distinction between privacy and utility. Okay, we've talked about privacy and utility. That's the concept we had last. Okay, so thank you very much. This is the end of our today's class. Meet you in chapter 3 for this course. Okay.